What is going on, everybody? This is Johnny with Sierra Whiskey Co., and today we are going to be teaching you the secrets to escaping handcuffs. Disclaimer: we do not recommend trying to escape police custody. However, if it's not Johnny Law that's got you in shackles, these techniques could really save your life. Police handcuffs are often not in the hands of police. They're very simple to get. You can buy them from many supply places and also on Amazon. We've even linked them down in the description so you can pick up a pair to practice your escapes with. We've also linked the Undertac handcuff, which has one translucent side and allows you to see what you're doing to get better at these techniques faster. Now, most of the handcuffs found in the US, the UK, Canada, and Latin America can all be opened with the same key, one in which we happen to sell on our website as an add-on item for our Undertac Infantry underwear. You should go there and pick up a pair while you're at it because, well, they could save your life. Junk secured, mission accomplished. You can store things in there like a handcuff key, a handcuff shim, Kevlar kite string, which we showed you how to escape zip ties, zip cuffs, and duct tape with already, a razor blade, a ceramic razor blade, money, whatever you would need to get out of a bad situation. Those can be found on our website at sierrawhiskeyco.com. One other disclaimer: these techniques may or may not work on those naughty bedroom handcuffs. A while back, we were training with active response training, and a retired law enforcement officer shared with us that a husband and wife, as they are wont to do deep into their relationship, were trying to spice things up a little bit. Well, they had a pair of the fuzzy handcuffs, and after all was said and done, they couldn't find the key. So the wife, in the middle of the night, drove to the police station and tried to get assistance. The husband did not accompany. Apparently he was too embarrassed. I can't imagine that helped the relationship much. That being said, they had a really hard time trying to remove those handcuffs. The key didn't work, and the locking mechanism was a bit stranger than the ones they were used to. Eventually they got her out, much to her embarrassment. So, lessons learned. These might not work on those type of handcuffs. Before we learn these techniques, we're going to have to learn the anatomy of a handcuff as well as the key. From there, we're going to be moving on to how to shim handcuffs, and then we will learn how to pick our way out of handcuffs with bobby pins that you can find in most drugstores or just steal them from your girlfriend. On to the external anatomy. First, the single strand, thusly named because there's one of them, and the aptly named double strand because, well, there's two. Then you have the check rivets, which hold the handcuff housing together, and the strand rivet, which holds, well, the strands together. Then the keyhole and key post. You're going to notice there is a post in the center of the keyhole. That is what the key fits over and indexes on. This is the swivel. It allows the handcuffs to swivel. And then the links, which hold the handcuffs together. Now on to the anatomy of the key. The post on the end is going to be the double lock tip for actuating the double lock. On the other end, we have the key flag, which is what we'll need to mimic in order to pick our way out. Now for the internal anatomy. The blue is the double lock bar. The red is the lock bar, and the yellow is the leaf spring, which tensions the lock bar into the ratcheting teeth. So let's see how this thing works. If we take the lock tip and actuate the double lock, it moves that bar over. Now we can no longer tighten that strand or open it. It is locked into place. In order for us to unlock this handcuff, we first need to move that double lock bar out of the way by turning the handcuff key counterclockwise. Once we have that double lock bar out of the way, we can then turn the key clockwise, and that will move the ratcheting teeth out of the way and allow us to undo the handcuff. A quick note about lock bars: sometimes they're single, double, or triple lock bars. Here you can see this training cuff has a double lock bar. In theory, the more lock bars, the more difficult they should be to pick. However, it really isn't that much more difficult if you have a couple lock bars. Here's what a single lock bar looks like on Peerless handcuffs. Now, in order to shim handcuffs, you're going to need a thin piece of metal that we're going to place between the strand teeth and the housing, and we're going to apply slight pressure and push inward on that single strand. As that strand depresses the lock bar, the shim can then slide between the two, allowing you to bring those ratcheting teeth back out and over the lock bar. Shimming is a very simple and effective technique. However, you are going to need 2 teeth worth of space to tighten that handcuff down. Here I'm using this on the Peerless handcuffs. You need to be able to ratchet this down. So if the double lock is in place, you're going to be out of luck. Here I'm also demonstrating it on the Smith & Wesson handcuffs. Other than not working on double locked handcuffs, this does have one major downfall. If you end up tightening that cuff around your wrist without getting the shim between the lock bar and the teeth, there's no way this technique's going to work. Now I'm going to show you how well the technique works with both handcuffs on. This technique is just as easy to do behind your back as it is in front, if not slightly easier. Here, since I'm doing it on camera, it's a little more difficult. I have to keep my hands in one place while simultaneously trying to keep tension on the shim and ratchet the handcuff tighter. If you're not doing this on camera, you can simply take the double strand and place it against your chest. Use the other hand to simultaneously put tension onto the shim and collapse the handcuff tighter. If your hands are handcuffed behind your back, you can simply use something in your environment, be it a wall or a chair, in order to ratchet the handcuff tighter, and then hold the shim in place with your hand. It took me around 4 to 5 minutes to shim my way out of these, but that was only because I had to keep my hands in frame. If I can use the environment, this takes 5 to 10 seconds per each cuff. And if a double lock isn't in place, this is easily the quickest and least painful way of getting out of handcuffs. And yes, can even be quicker than using a key. Now we're going to move on to picking handcuffs with a bobby pin. And when you're done practicing, you're going to end up with a tangled mess like that. Here we have 2 of the more popular brands of handcuffs, Peerless on the left and Smith & Wesson on the right. I want you to notice that the lock mechanism is in a different orientation on each handcuff. Now this is going to be important in what we need to know in order to pick our way out of these. The quickest way to pick yourself out of cuffs is to understand what orientation the key needs to be in order to undo the locking mechanisms. Just put the key in and turn it, noting orientation to find out. Or you can just watch this since I did the work for you. Now we're going to imagine that the slot for the key flag is at the 12 o'clock position. On these Peerless handcuffs, in order to undo the double lock, you'll have to move the key from the 2 o'clock to the 3 o'clock position. And to undo the lock bar, you'll have to move it from the 8 o'clock to the 7 o'clock position. The other handcuff is going to be mirrored. So in order to undo the double lock, you'll have to move from the 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock position and the lock bar from the 4 o'clock to the 5 o'clock position. Now that's just for the peerless handcuffs. The Smith & Wesson handcuffs have a different orientation of the key flag, but we are still going to use the o'clock positions, with the flag being at 12 o'clock. Now on the Smith & Wesson, in order to undo the double lock, you'll have to move from the 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock position, and the lock bar from the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock position. Again, this is going to be mirrored on the other handcuff. So the double lock will be from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and the lock bar from the 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock position. If that's too confusing, again, you can always just use the key to see what orientation it needs to be in. This is going to be our lock picking tool for the day. These bobby pins are cheap and easy to get. Here I have a thinner one and a much thicker one. Each one has their pros and cons, which we will cover. Before we implement these tools, we're going to have to do a little preparation. You're going to notice the plastic tips on here. That is not conducive to our needs. So I recommend grabbing a knife or an X-Acto knife and shaving away that plastic. Now, if you're in a life or death situation, you could use your teeth. However, that plastic is very tough, so it is not recommended. We need to shape the tool to mimic the key flag. So take one end of the pin and put it to the bottom of the keyhole and bend it over completely. Then you're going to lift it halfway out and bend it in the other direction. You should end up with a sort of dogleg-like shape. With this peerless handcuff, we need to move the mechanism from the 4 o'clock to the 5 o'clock position. So once we have that into position, we're going to put it at the 4 o'clock position and put tension downward towards the face of the handcuff. Then we are going to rotate that clockwise while keeping that tension, and the cuff should pop right open. We'll give this a try on the other handcuff. Remember that the other handcuff is going to be mirrored. So for this one, we're going to have to go from the 8 o'clock to the 7 o'clock position. Put that tension downward towards the face and then twist counterclockwise since this one is mirrored. You don't always get this on your first try. In fact, it can be a little tricky until you get the hang of it. Sometimes when we're holding that tension against the key post, the bobby pin wants to slide off. If you remain diligent, you'll get it eventually. Now to demonstrate with both cuffs on. This can be a bit tricky and you may have to bend the pin to get the correct purchase. This isn't as challenging as one might think. The real challenge is when the handcuffs are behind your back, getting the bobby pin into the correct orientation. It's not easy, but it definitely can be done. Picking your way out of handcuffs is one thing. However, when the double lock is engaged, that can be an entirely different beast. The double lock needs more pressure in order to undo it than just to undo the lock bar, because you're sliding that bar instead of just pivoting it. Now, with these smaller, lighter bobby pins, they really didn't work all that well trying to do the double lock. In fact, it didn't work at all. What ended up happening was the bobby pins would just bend. And if you bend these too many times, you can have parts of them start to break off. If part of it breaks off and stays in the lock mechanism, you're gonna have a really bad day, because then you might not even be able to get a key to unlock that handcuff. So here we're switching to the thicker bobby pins to see if we can undo the double lock. The thick pins are much more substantial and you can create a lot more tension. The double locks on my handcuffs aren't broken in at all, so it takes quite a bit to get them to move. Since these pins are much thicker, we need a different shape. So just put it into the key flag slot and then bend it over, and that should do the trick. Since the double locks take so much more effort to undo, and I'm using a different shape, you're going to notice that the pin itself is in a more upright position and I start to twist it. This did the trick. Sometimes you just need to figure out some of this with trial and error. Now, one thing to note about these thicker ones is they are a lot more brittle. I went to bend this piece out of the way and it just broke. So you do need to be careful while applying tension. One thing that you will notice is the key post on this particular pair of handcuffs starts to wobble around a bit. Now this is a brand new pair of peerless handcuffs, and I'm not sure if this was a bad unit or what, but the pins, after just a little bit of practice, wobbled around quite a bit and in fact ended up popping right out with just a little bit of pressure. The Smith & Wesson handcuffs proved to be quite a bit more challenging. One of the reasons was there was not a lot of space between the key post and the housing of the handcuff. It also required a different shape due to the orientation of the lock mechanism. Instead of a dogleg shape, you can see I'm bending it over to make more of a C shape. The C shape can be easily created by putting the tip of the pin into the flag slot and bending it over, putting more of the pin in there and then bending it over again. Now this mechanism is at the 2 o'clock position and needs to be moved over to the 3 o'clock. So we can use that C shape to go into the flag slot, apply a little bit of downward tension, and then move that clockwise in order to get these to unlock. Once you have the hang of the Smith & Wesson handcuffs, when you put them both on, they end up being slightly easier than getting out of the peerless handcuffs. And we can associate this with the positioning of the lock mechanism itself. Instead of being in the center of the handcuff, they are more towards the outside of the handcuff. This gives you a little bit more room to maneuver and operate. If this is a skill you want to acquire, I highly recommend practicing with your non-dominant hand as well. It can take a little bit more time to undo the lock mechanism with your non-dominant hand if you're not used to it. If you just practice with one hand, you will only be good with one hand, and it's going to be much more of a challenge if you need to bust these skills out. Using my non-dominant hand here, it ended up taking me about 2 minutes to get out of this handcuff. With the Smith & Wesson handcuffs, I was not able to pick the double lock. The heavy-duty bobby pins were too thick to fit between the housing of the handcuff and the key post, and the thin bobby pins were not strong enough to undo the double lock. That being said, I was able to pick the Smith & Wessons with the larger bobby pin without the double lock on. But that is only because of the orientation of the mechanism itself. I was able to put the pin into the key flag slot and use that extra space to unlock the mechanism. There's also a method to break out of handcuffs that we didn't show here. This video is getting a little long. We might save that one for the future. All of these things considered, the best thing you can do is just to carry a handcuff key if you feel that you might be in need of one day. They're cheap, they're really easy to use, and they always work. And that is how you escape handcuffs. If you've enjoyed this content, please like, share, and comment on anything else you would like us to cover. And we will be sure to be coming out with much, much more in the future. And until next time, keep on rocking in the free world. Techniques in order to save your life. And they're testing the elevator alarm.
That's great.